Some of my best friends are false prophets, and some of your friends are false prophets too. False prophets are very common in our day, and you don't have to be a vicious, wicked, evil person to be a false prophet. You just have to be a person who claims to prophesy something that happens to be false. That's what makes you a false prophet. We have an election coming up, and you can get on YouTube and find all kinds of prophecies about your favorite and your unfavorite candidate. Just put in their name, put in the word prophecy, and you'll find prophecies to fit. So I want to talk with you from the wisdom of Jeremiah about 5 characteristics of a false prophet, because we should not waste our vote on the advice of false prophets. We should not waste our time on the advice of false prophets, and we should not corrupt our souls by developing an appetite for false prophets. So, what are 5 characteristics of a false prophet, courtesy of Jeremiah? I'm going to tell you right now. Here we go. The first is there are those who are just sincerely wrong. They're not malicious, they're not malignant, they're not satanic, they're just wrong. They're sincerely wrong. Jeremiah talks about them. He says, Adonai Tzavaot says, don't listen to the words of the prophets who are prophesying to you. They're making you act foolishly, telling you visions of their own minds and not from the mouth of Adonai. That's the essence of it. Visions from their own minds. They sincerely believe that it's from God, but it's not. He goes on to say in chapter 14, the prophets are prophesying lies in my name. I didn't send them, I didn't order them or speak to them. They're prophesying false visions to you, worthless divinations, the delusions of their own minds. So you're going to find that. You know people who do this. They're not necessarily nasty people, but don't encourage them to do this and don't follow their advice. They're only presenting delusions of their own minds. Jeremiah goes on to talk, secondly, about people who are knowingly deceptive. Yeshua talks about this too. He says, there will appear false messiahs and false prophets performing signs and wonders for the purpose, if possible, of misleading the chosen. They have a purpose. They want to mislead you. Beware of these people who are knowingly deceptive. Unfortunately, people fall for this every day of the week. It's kind of a spiritual robocall. Don't give them your credit card number. You know what I mean? Don't give these people your spiritual credit card number. Watch out for the knowingly deceptive. Thirdly, there are people who are profiteering prophets. Frankly, they're in it for the money. Jeremiah, who teaches us more about true prophets and false prophets than anyone else, talks about this. He says, for from the least of them to the greatest of them, all are greedy for gain. Prophets and Kohanim alike, they all practice fraud. And there are people who are making a buck off of this. I plead with you, be wise as a serpent and harmless as a dove. Being harmless as a dove does not mean being a dumb pigeon. You've got to be wise as a serpent, and don't be fooled. The fourth kind of false prophet are preferred prophets. These are the prophets that we shop around for. They're the prophets who tell us what we want to hear. Jeremiah, in writing back to the exiles, the first wave of exiles in Babylon, he discovers they're very upset with what he's saying, because what he's saying is, folks, you're going to be there for 70 years, says the word of the Lord. So marry off your sons, marry off your daughters, plant vineyards, plant gardens, eat the fruit of them, pray for the peace of the city, for in their peace you will find peace. The people don't like that message at all. They think they're only there for a sojourn. So they write back to him and they say, we have found prophets of our own The Lord has raised up prophets for us in Babylon. We got the kind of prophets we want. So watch out. Don't shop for prophets that scratch your itch the way you want it scratched, that puff the person you want puffed. This is not a game. Do not take false prophecies in the name of the Lord. We come now to a fifth category of false prophet. This is tailor-made prophets. Sometimes people have an appetite for a certain kind of message, and they'll find somebody with a certain amount of charisma, and when he says something they like, they encourage him and they reinforce him, and he gets kind of full of himself, and he begins to believe big things about himself, and they believe big things about him, and they have this kind of symbiotic relationship where they end up making a person into a false prophet by approving of and puffing things that they should not approve of. They create tailor-made prophets. This is all a very bad idea. So let me give you two final ideas to make you wise in a day like ours. Not this one, this one. I want you to think of the immoral majority. Did you know that in the Bible, the majority of prophets are false prophets? Elijah was the only prophet he knew of in his day, the only true prophet. Sure, there were 7,000 people who had not bowed the knee to Baal, but he was the only prophet that he could find. But how many prophets did Ahab have? He had 400 prophets of Baal. That's 400 to 1. That's the immoral majority. Later, in the same book, in 1 Kings, we read about Micaiah, another true prophet. The same Ahab, now he has 400 prophets who are prophets of Adonai. They're deceived prophets. And Micaiah is the only one who is a faithful prophet. So you need to recognize that not only are the hills alive with the sound of music, but the hills are stuffed with false prophets. And therefore, watch out for this immoral majority. And finally, watch out for people who are politically partisan. In the Bible, very often the false prophets were people who were joined to a certain ruler, and they would end up telling the ruler and his administration and the people what was popular. That's not a good idea. Beware of this. Look for prophets who are going to say the word of the Lord, even if it's contrary to their own political preferences. Beware of politically partisan prophets, because biblically, that's usually the way false prophecy happens. That each court, each king, each administration would have their own prophets that were reinforcing their message. Well, I've given you my message. I hope it's helped you. I'm going to put up on, with the description of this video, a link to a blog that goes into these matters in greater detail. I hope you'll visit it, and I hope I've helped you here at Interfaithfulness, where we're building bridges, where history builds walls. Shalom for now.